Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Ritchie, VP of Trade and Technology Policy at the Forum. I apologize that you're just hearing my voice floating over the internet. I wasn't able to engage my webcam today. I especially want to thank the Consul General and his staff at the consulate for co-sponsoring today's event. The U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum is a bilateral trade association representing U.S. companies doing business in India. In addition to trade and industrial work, we also work on cultural and educational issues to deepen the bilateral relationship. We wanted to host today's session bringing together the consulate and U.S. higher educational institutions because our members are large employers in India and are interested in expanding their workforce to the extent the labor market will provide. We see India's new education policy as strategically significant to our members as they plan to expand their workforce in India in the coming years. Collaboration between U.S. higher educational institutions and Indian academia is an important element to that goal. We are also partnering with Sonam S4, our member company, who brings us expertise in the educational arena. Together, we host the U.S.-India Knowledge Exchange, an initiative focused on increasing joint research and collaboration between the two countries' educational institutions. Sonam S4 is a global market entry firm with experience in advising higher education institutions on their internationalization strategy. The firm represents over 80 universities from 9 different countries, including some of the world's leading research universities from the U.S., who have existing joint research collaborations in India. So again, let me thank the Consul General for joining us and welcome our guests from U.S. educational institutions. At this point, I will turn the microphone over to Adrian Mutton, founder and CEO of Sonam S4, to moderate the balance of today's session. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to the wider US ISPF team for the ongoing partnership in this important US-India education agenda, and to fellow members at McGraw-Hill for supporting today's webinar. We look forward to your comments towards the end of the discussion. So I'd like to welcome and thank the Honorary Consul General Randir Jaswal in New York, representing India as of the 19th of July, if I'm not incorrect. We are tremendously grateful for you participating in this discussion today and sharing your views on what is a very historic step for India, which is a fundamental reform of its higher education agenda. To provide our audience an insight into the Honorary Consul General's background, he is a career diplomat who has spent the last 2 decades representing the government of India in Portugal, Cuba, South Africa, and at the permanent mission of India in New York previously. In between his assignments, he served in New Delhi at the Ministry of External Affairs as the Deputy Secretary, First and Deputy Secretary, looking after both India's relationship with the Americas as well as Western Europe. And has been the Joint Secretary managing a broad portfolio of the MEA's strategic initiatives. The Honorary Consul General has also had the privilege and honour of working for the President of India as Joint Secretary, managing the international portfolio of strategic relations and interests of the President of India. And I understand, Honorary Consul General, that you are a passionate sports fan. You've been actively involved in promoting Indian culture. You have great interest in India's history and have studied history at Delhi University, which is wonderful to see a like-minded arts student these days, particularly from India. And we know that you've been very active in the global conservation and environmental agenda, and you were the lead negotiator for the G77 countries at the Rio+20 UN Conference on Sustainable Development in Brazil in 2012. So welcome. We're delighted to work with you on this initiative today. We know that you will be a continued partner of us going forward. Your predecessor was a very active supporter of India's higher education agenda. And so a big thank you from Sanam S4, from our partners, and welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, a big thank you to Sanam S4 and to US India Strategic Partnership Forum for bringing us together. We have announced the new education policy in India, and that has got all the stakeholders involved in education in India and abroad, all the stakeholders who are engaged, excited, and that's the reason why we are here for you. It's the education portfolio of this bilateral relationship between the US and India is such an important component of it, and it has to be so as well. The India-US relations, we have very strong economic underpinnings of it. We have very strong scientific and technology underpinnings of it. As also the community connect is very strong. And when you have such a large, when you're dealing with such large canvas of relationship, it is but natural that you come in with the student exchange program, you come in with the education cooperation program, so on and so forth, because that provides the support and also feeds into the various pillars of relationship that we have. We have a government in India led by the Prime Minister, deeply committed to reforming India, deeply committed to building a new India. We recently, even though we were in the middle of a pandemic, we announced a new set of economic reforms. You would have also had a look and got to know of the reforms that we had initiated earlier. But in the middle of the pandemic, we announced a slew of new reforms in the space sector, in the defense sector. And this flow of the new economic reform, that you see in the education field, flows from that larger commitment to reforming various aspects of governance and nation building in the country. The new economic policy, a new education policy, it has various components of it. And whenever, in the case of India being an old civilization, whenever you talk of education, your imagination takes you back, and Adrian, you would attest to that, Lalit, you would attest to that. Your imagination takes you back centuries, where you talk, when you have the image of the first university of the world before you, Nalanda University in the present day state of Bihar. It flourished. It was at its height in the 7th to 8th century, and that time you had 10,000 students. I'm not sure how many of our listeners would imagine there were 10,000 students from all over Asia and far and wide, from Far East, from Southeast Asia, so on and so forth. And it's important why I say that, because if we had such luminaries in ancient India, from Kautilya, from Patanjali, from Charak, the great physician. So if an education system produced such brilliant minds, obviously there was something very special about it, and we need to bring those elements into our modern thinking, into our modern way of educating ourselves. All these elements do come to your mind space when you're talking of a new education agenda, especially when you look at some of the new initiatives that have been brought in to the new economic education policy, such as taking the advantage of mother tongue and mother languages for school education, for example. There are several aspects of this new reform. There's a school aspect, and there's the higher education aspect. In the school aspect, there are elements such as a new curriculum. How do you bring in modern pedagogy? How do you bring in the element of creativity and imagination? Many in India would attest that we've somehow got boxed down in our school education, even though the maths and science part of it is very strong. But when it comes to thinking, you need to roughen out some of the edges that are there, with new energy infused through creativity and imagination and new analysis. But here, of course, what is of interest to us would be what's happening in the higher education space, or what lies ahead in the higher education space by way of reform. We also have, but let me tell you, we also have a lot of young students, because we are living in an age of globalization. People have different aspirations. You have young Indian students studying in UK, studying in Singapore, in World United Colleges, in Hong Kong and elsewhere, because that's the society now. That's the nature of the society now. You want to be eclectic. You want to take the best from the world and see how best you can contribute to globalization, to economics of globalization, to the cultural aspect of globalization, so on and so forth. But in the new education policy, it's work in progress. We'll see a new structure to come up. There's a new commission to be formed, new higher education commission, which will have several new verticals in terms of regulatory, funding requirements, regulatory requirements, curriculum requirements. I'll not go into the specifics of it. That is therefore in the open source for everybody to read. But what it brings essentially is a new governance, one. It also brings in a lot of flexibility. It brings in the element of vocational education in higher education. We have introduced a 4-year course, undergrad course, but with built-in flexibility for people to exit if they want after a year, after 2 years, after 3 years. They can also add on things. So undergrad with research allows you to straight away jump for a PhD program. So those are new flexibilities that have been brought in. They will also introduce the new credit system, which is prevalent in many parts of the world, here in the United States and elsewhere. The credit systems allows you to move from one educational institution to the other if you are interested in some other course in some other university in any other part of the world or in any other part of India. We also, to cut down duplication and to make things more efficient and smooth, we announced the setting up of a national testing agency, like you have SAT here, and it'll bring a lot of benefit to students, because you, instead of writing multiple exams for multiple universities in India, you are tested once, and that validation is good for universities across. But the real value for India, US, and all the stakeholders, as I see, lies in some of the elements that would give a major push to international cooperation in the field of education. One is, the element of foreign universities being allowed to set up campuses in India. Of course, that will need a lot more support in terms of legislation, parliamentary approvals, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, we have set the ball rolling. For the time being, our guidelines say that the top 100 universities, for example, they would be allowed to set up campuses in India. Secondly, we have established, or we are going to establish, the National Research Foundation that will have very strong mandate to propel research collaboration. And this assumes significance in the backdrop of the digital age that we are living in. We are talking of the 4th industrial revolution. We are also talking of AI, blockchain, data, big data, so on and so forth. These are new areas, and this is where we see the partnership between the United States and India through the National Research Foundation could be of immense value. We also have a proposal, apart from the existing universities and new universities that are going to come up, to set up multidisciplinary educational institutions of higher learning. There again, we want to learn from what's happening in various parts of the world, from the best practices from around the world. And the 4th element is this credit bank, academic credit bank that we've created. For the time being, what we are talking of course, to roll out foreign universities in India will take some time. To begin with, we can see if we can have training program between universities in the United States and India, so that a student could do a credit in India and thereafter could pick up credits from the United States. He could do a course in mathematics in the United States and do a course in music and Bollywood in India. So a cross-fertilization and coming together of different streams. The other element, an interesting element, there again we see a lot of potential, is that Indian universities would be allowed to open campuses abroad. Now, when you have such a proposal, obviously a partnership is required. You have the universities here in the United States have substantial experience of working abroad, of setting up ecosystems in Middle East and elsewhere in the world. And I think the Indian universities will find it useful to partner with many of the universities here. Already we have Indian engineering colleges. We were talking about it a little while ago. For example, the Bilra Institute of Technology with a campus in Dubai. You will see many such initiatives flowing out of this new educational reform program. We have learned a lot from the United States. We have several models in place. For example, the International School of Business in Hyderabad. It is a collaboration with several management schools here, including the Kellogg School. We have Ashoka University and several other new universities which are modeled on some of the best practices in the United States, the way things happen here. And I see a lot more traction in this field happening as we go forward. We, as government, we are committed to bringing in more student exchange program, more internships, connecting young entrepreneurs and young innovators on both sides. So all these will then form the matrix and will derive strength from the new education policy that we've put in place. So what I'll do is that, I will rest myself here, and then as Adrian, you take us through the discussion flow, we'll come in with new ideas that we have or any other things that we want to contribute. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that insightful overview. And I think one of the things that struck me when the National Education Policy was announced, that it is so much more than just one component of addressing an education need. This is about developing India's citizens and workforce and researchers and future educators to be really at the front end, cutting edge of their own global field. And as we are well aware, India is the largest, youngest population in the world, and it has 12 million graduates per year coming out into the workforce. And we've been talking for many years about India's demographic dividend, and there's been this concern that we're not turning that demographic into a dividend. It's actually becoming an Achilles heel for India, and I think something like the National Education Policy can play a tremendous role in equipping India's young, but also reskilling career age individuals to be equipped for what is a rapidly changing environment. Many of the participants on the call, and that you will get to meet over time in your domain in the northeast of the United States, are very active proponents of the partnership between US and India already, whether that be, of course, in housing and hosting students for short or long-term programs, whether that be through collaborative research, of which in your region there are some tremendously exciting research initiatives that are making a genuine impact on India's key priorities. And I think what we've seen as an organization, and why we've always been keen to focus our energies on this, is that the role that this reform plays within a much broader section of society. This is not just about campuses being established on the ground in India. It is at the heart of advancing India's research agenda and capitalizing on existing and future brain power to solve the future problems, both domestically in India, regionally, and of course, more broadly internationally. It's about creating value and wealth creation for all sections of Indian community to be able to participate in India's future economic growth agenda. And it's about opening India up to be a true global partner to the world in the way that I think, particularly in the last few years, the world is looking for leadership and the world is looking for collaboration. And while some people are stepping away from international collaboration country to country, what really excites me about this stance from the Modi government is that it is opening the doors to international collaboration in a very, very strategic way. And that is, I think, really refreshing in today's global environment. So the opportunities, I think, are in abundance. And of course, the headlines are taken by the idea of a campus. But I'd like to focus on a couple of topics with you, and then we have some members of the audience that I will open up for questions to you directly. Just in terms of the collaborative, everyone understands what a foreign university campus could look like overseas. And so I don't want to spend a huge amount of time. That's going to be debated as to whether, as you say, the top 100 or more are allowed into India. We are advocating for that to be expanded so that genuinely best of breed, perhaps by school, by faculty, by learning environment are allowed in as well. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the partnership opportunity that this presents. India is committed, and in fact, early under the first term of Prime Minister Modi's government, when he established Niti Aayog, there was a very early publicly stated commitment to developing international partnerships, and education plays a big role in developing those partnerships. And what we now see as an opportunity is, on one hand, the commitment and need for the internationalization of all Indian universities, which is a very significant undertaking. Historically, just private universities have perhaps embarked on international collaborative relationships, or the IITs or the IIMs that have fairly globally mobile faculty or connections with other parts of the world. Could you just talk to us a little bit about how you see some of those collaborations developing, such that the US role in helping Indian institutions develop an agenda that is truly global, where we're leveraging the best of India's brain power, all of the assets that India provides, and combining that with the US partners? Can you give some of your thoughts on how that could play out and what US universities should be looking for in terms of strategic partnerships along those lines?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your giving a broad overview of how to look at the new economic policy and a new education policy and how it fits into our overall objective of internationalizing our economy and ourselves in terms of foreign policy as well. You know, the US-India cooperation is an expansive canvas. We have almost 200,000 students who are studying here, of which 55,000 students are in the jurisdiction of the New York Consulate. We also have, under the Partnership 2020, we have almost 240 research partnerships ongoing, and these are just the tip of the iceberg. All that happens between university and university directly, between schools and business schools, between India and business schools in the United States, that's a separate altogether corridor, but a huge amount of exchanges are happening there as well. You know, when we are talking of a new governance structure, when we are talking of a new program, a more modern program that is attuned to 21st century global aspirations of people, that fits very well into the digital age. Obviously, we have a lot to learn ourselves, and on some of the aspects, we also have a few things to share. You know, on frugal innovation, things that are happening on the sustainability side, on climate change side, the new things that we're doing with seeds, for example. We are looking at genetic pool of crops of crops that were grown say 10,000 years ago, tomatoes that were grown earlier in South America, and they were very resistant to climate then. It was much colder climate. So we're looking at all those things. So we, on the science and technology side, I think both countries, US, of course, it's a powerhouse on research and development, but equally we brings a lot of value, and that value can come into our lives through economics, through science and technology, through collaboration, and through technology, through the new avenues that are being created through the new economic education policy. I also like to add one thing. While we are creating a new ecosystem in India, we would also like that our international partners look at how they can also make the ecosystem, because the higher education ecosystem, when we open up, the opening would cover not just India, but opening would extend to the United States, for example. And when you're talking of this openness, we also need some more support in terms of mobility partnership. So those will be some of the homework that you will, our friends here will be looking at as to what sort of facilitative environment they create for students, for young minds, and for innovators to come and go, to work here and work there, to study here and study there, to make a research project here and research project there, a flow of information, flow of knowledge. So that facilitative framework also has to be created. While we are talking of higher education, for that we have to create a base for greater acceptability of the program, and for which we need to inject the idea of international campuses, international programs among students, school students early on. I know for a fact that a lot of schools, they send children for an exposure trip to the United States, to NASA, they also have several student exchange program where a student from India comes and lives in a home in the United States, and a student from here goes and lives in a home in Calcutta. So that sort of facilitative environment, if we can do a lot more on that account, will be so helpful for a new education reform program. So those are some of the thoughts that came to my mind, but I think it's a real partnership where we are doing, and we would request our partners also to create more space for our program. खुद ही नहीं किया हुआ है.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We've had thank you very much for that summary. We had a question from the audience about why the government of India is only allowing the top 100 ranked universities to have the opportunity of setting up their own campus in India. I'd just like to quantify and qualify for everyone that is a recommendation that has been put forward. As the Consul General has suggested, this now goes for discussion in Parliament. We will be advocating that 100 is expanded to allow specialist departments and specialist schools of university, so that it isn't limiting only to 100 by ranking. So there's still work to be done there to advocate on behalf of institutions outside of whichever ranking it is that they use for the top 100, because there are some excellent schools sir, in your region who have some of the best business schools, some of the best pharmaceutical schools, some of the best training academies that are not ranked in the top 100, but those particular fields are very much in the top 20, 30, 40, 50 in the world, and India should not preclude the opportunity of partnership with those institutions. So just so that I can kind of address that head on, do you have anything else to say about the current suggestion that it will be just the top 100, and whether you agree that we should be continuing to advocate to broaden that out to allow other strong and willing partners?
See, the national education policy has been announced. As to how we give shape to it is work in progress. We have to take the legislative route for several things. At the same time, we are engaged with all the stakeholders. Now, what you just talked about, why the limit of 100, for example, is a very good feedback for us. And given that, there are higher education institutions beyond 100 who can have add a lot of value and who have a lot of value. So this is a very good feedback for us, and we shall convey this to our government. And I would also request that when you are engaging with our people in India, you'd also, if you could convey this sentiment to them, it will be helpful for us. We are open to suggestions. We are open to feedback.
I think why it's a really important topic to cover is that some of the most advanced departments or schools within schools are those that are dealing with cutting edge technology or cutting edge healthcare or research that doesn't necessarily bear a reflection on the wider international ranking that university may have, and you'll find that as you go out to engage with some of the schools in your region. And so I think what India has the opportunity to do is to look at what its needs are. Where are the priorities? You talked about agricultural research. You talked about areas in science and technology and space where individual schools within university systems or within the universities themselves are genuinely best of breed globally, but the ranking may be outside the top 100. So I think one of the things that we will be working with you on and with your colleagues in India is mapping out what India's priorities are and how can we bring partners to the table that can genuinely make an impact on India's stated sustainable development goals to ensure that we're addressing society at the base of the pyramid, to ensure that we're developing R&D in areas that India not only wants to develop, but over time wants to own domestically as well, so that we can create some value in India in the economy, so that it just doesn't become a research workshop alone in the way that some of the IT businesses have been built over the past. So I think there's a strategic opportunity for us all there. On the research side, India, as it's developed this NEP, has looked very closely at the US's approach to research and the National Research Fund and the way that the US research funding is allocated outside of its respective ministries and pushed through the university system, and the way that universities through the Bayh-Dole Act have enabled universities to be more autonomous in their research, to be more international in their collaborations. And of course, if you walk onto any US campus these days, it is a very global collaborative environment. Talk to us a little bit about the research agenda and how you see that could play out with US partners that are keen to do research in India over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Well, one thing which is very certain and which has been a learning from our interaction with global institutions is that we have to have a more open approach to research. We have to have research is a dynamic space. You cannot just limit it to research per se sitting in a lab, for example. You have to look at research from end to end. There's a spectrum. Research is a component of the spectrum, and how it begins from lab, how do you take it to the farm, for example? If we are looking at an agricultural product, how do you connect it to farms, and how do you connect it to end users and customers? So that is one aspect. We want to make the research program in India more dynamic, connecting it to more stakeholders. And for the timing, of course, we have a huge network of research institutions which have done well so far for nation building, for adding value to our economy, to our society, etc. But I think it's time that we also added some more value to it and brought in new stakeholders and looked at how research in the United States is connected, universities are connected to the industry, and how the industry then is connected to the market, how you develop research to become a product, and then how that product is developed further to fit into the needs of the society. So that is the broader approach to research that we have. We have young minds. A lot of innovation is happening in India. We have the Indian startup space is vibrant. We have almost over 20,000 startups in India now. People are doing a lot of exciting things. The other day I was talking to my colleague. I don't know, Adrian, if you would have visited Mathura. It's a Hindu city with a lot of temples there. A young fellow, straight up pass out from an engineering college. What he does every morning, he collects flowers that are offered to gods, and then those flowers are made into foams and incense sticks. So a lot of exciting things are happening. You're using uh, using things in a manner that you bring more sustainability in your life. So that was just an example. Also, we want to bring in a culture of research, a real culture of research where people think, and we want to build an ecosystem around that. You may be a brilliant scientist, for example, but if you don't have an ecosystem around you, it's very difficult as to how you can process your thought or convert your thought into a real research. So that is how we are looking at uh, things for the time being.
Yes, I think that culture of research at an individual level has always been there. India has some of the best researchers in the world, and they contribute in India and internationally to the corporate agenda, a lot of the think tanks clearly, and I'm sure a lot of the R&D that's being done for the vaccine program will be done with Indian scientists in different countries, no doubt. So I think the opportunity is to build that out to be an inherent part of the university system in India. There is a dearth of corporate research in India that leads to the creation of commercial value. That becomes increasingly strategic, as we know now, with developments like 5G, with military technology, with agricultural research technology. It's very, very important that India develops its own intellectual property in areas that are key to its longer term success. So that was one of the areas that I was most excited about, is the opportunity to collaborate in that research field, to see that the funding that is currently held by the ministries will be pushed out much more broadly into the university system. And I hear you saying that that's a really good opportunity for international partners to bring their expertise to the fore. And just one example of that is in our work launching the US-India Knowledge Exchange, we've been talking to the government of India in Delhi about just how to develop a research environment. And a lot of US universities know how to set up a research lab, how to manage it, what technology gets plugged in, what the budgets look like. And that expertise alone is hugely valuable as India looks to scale up its research agenda across the country. So to facilitate a lot of these partnerships, a lot of those on the call and stakeholders that you will speak to have had challenges, doing business in India challenges, let's put it like that, in the higher education space. And because it's higher education, it doesn't get the airtime that the defense sector gets, or the pharma sector gets, or the IT sector gets. And that's exactly why our House and US ISPF, with yours and the embassy's support, launched the US-India Knowledge Exchange 2 years ago, to make sure that this agenda is front and foremost of both governments in the United States and in India. And we're very pleased to hear that a lot of our early requests are now being answered as part of the evolution of this discussion. What more can the partners who are on the call do to provide you and your colleagues in Delhi with feedback to ensure that as the policy rolls out, it is as fluid as possible? Because there have been some tremendous improvements in doing business in India for a corporate, but whether it be FCRA for some of our research focused universities, whether it be the equalization levy that was recently announced, whether it be the mobility of faculty to go into India from the United States, some of that is genuinely still difficult to do and just hasn't been addressed. How can we help you? How can we work with you to shape the practical framework that is really going to make sure that we don't walk into a wall in a year or two's time?
No, thank you, Adrian. We would really appreciate if Sanam can bring in all the feedback that our various stakeholders have on issues with India with regard to the clearances or the difficulties that people face, so that we can look at them. We've done well. If you were to look at the ease of doing business for the corporates, of course, we have done many things. There are certain things which still remain to be looked at or acted upon. But having said that, we are committed to creating the best environment for researchers and to see how best we can really give a boost and transform the research ecosystem in India. So that is the commitment. On the commitment side, I can say that we are fully with you. We want to make the research space dynamic, and for that we want to connect with our stakeholders. We want to connect with their ideas, and if their ideas and suggestions, if there's a contradiction between what we think, we are open to looking at them. We also want to, the research so far, the general understanding in India was that the government has to take lead and the government would be spending R&D. Of course, the private companies, private sector, they've also come forward, but largely it remains in the hands of the government. That needs to change because we are in an age of partnership. We have to do things together. A lot of exciting and new things are happening on the private side as well. You would have seen the latest reforms on the space side, for example. It was one sector which was totally controlled in the hands of the government. But now it is time, I think, that we open the sector. In the digital age, there are huge implications for the value of space technology comes to our lives. So, and innovation, we have a National Innovation Foundation as well. We have a lot of things to do there. So all in all, what I'm saying is that the new education policy is a commitment. It's work in progress. These are early days, but we are open to engaging with all our stakeholders, and we want to have this dialogue on a continuous basis so that we can keep feeding into India that this is what we hear from our stakeholders, and we value all your partnership. You're so very important. It's not that it may be national education policy, fine, but don't get bogged down with the word national. International is an important element of that national today. So we are there for you, and we look forward to your feedback and suggestions.
Great, thank you. Well, I would say that the timing is very good because the world is looking for strong partnerships. India is opening up its arms to partnerships in this area, and the global research community is looking for a new home, and India, I think, has the ability to do that. Whilst we've talked about making India as a strategic initiative, I've always been lobbying to Delhi to launch a research in India initiative, because I think that plays to India's greatest strengths, actually, which is its brain power. So that's something we will work on together, and the practical issues around research visas, FCRA, mobility, we will work on that with you and produce a very clear set of recommendations to ensure this is successful. So I'd like to open this up to a few members of the audience to contribute. One of the things that we've talked about today is specialist areas where the US has a genuinely world-leading position and can play a role in helping India develop its future economy. India has been at the forefront of medical tourism, yet there is still much more opportunity in the medical sector when you expand that into the wider healthcare and pharmacy space. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Duron from MCPHS from Boston to introduce herself and make some remarks around MCPHS's strategy in India. They've been long-term proponents of the country and are doubling down on this opportunity. So are you there, Ita?
Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you? Yes, good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. And my thanks and my heartfelt welcome to Consul General Jeswal, or should I say welcome back, because I think you're coming back to known territory here in the Northeast. We're very, very happy and see a great opportunity to welcome you here. So as Adrian said, my name is Ita Duran. I am Executive Director of Global Strategy and International Programs at the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences in Boston. I am responsible for maintaining those connections between healthcare industries around the world as they evolved and what their needs are, with our programs and how we train graduates to respond to those needs. Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, or our president likes us to use the acronym, which he thinks is much easier to say, MCPHS. I'll leave you with your opinion on that. Is unique in that it is one of those specialist institutions that Adrian has mentioned. We are one of the few private and independent universities specialized in healthcare in the US, and we have been so for close to 200 years. Consul General Jeswal, we work frequently with your consulate's team. They have given presentations to our Indian students and faculty. They keep us abreast of all things education and healthcare happening of interest, and we thank them sincerely. We work together to continue to make our students aware of opportunities back in India. We have been in India for 6 years, and thanks to our collaboration and with the valuable guidance and insights of the Sanam S4 team, we've been able to establish ourselves in 4 major subject areas in India. Pharmaceuticals, namely with our Doctor of Pharmacy, which I know is a relatively new degree in India, but is catching on quickly by professionals, but also recognized by the patient population. We have a strong foothold with regulatory affairs, which has been our specialty in the United States and is also being recognized in India. That is the training of professionals who guide pharmaceutical companies abroad and in the United States through the labyrinth of FDA regulations. We also prepare students for medical schools, and we have a strong foothold in the public health arena, which is now seeing a spike this year for obvious reasons. Therefore, MCPHS places itself within 2 major axes of Indian priorities: education and healthcare, as we have mentioned very often. Up until now, we particularly see immense opportunity in India as we witness the growth and innovation in the Indian healthcare industry. One of the things that India does much better than the United States is the ability to provide excellent service at a much lower price, and we have much to learn from you in this area. Now, never has the link between the performance of the healthcare industry and the health of the economy been more evident as it is this year, with a direct cause and effect relation to bringing back India onto a double-digit growth trajectory. Here, MCPHS seeks to be an active contributor in both, in the development of innovative pedagogies to train the much-needed healthcare practitioners for India's hospitals, public and private, as we see the growth of the private hospital sector, and the regulatory systems, as we see the development of a more standardized regulatory system for pharmaceuticals and medicines, knowing that India is often called the pharmacy of the world. We are a teaching university at heart, but we are experts in developing ad hoc healthcare training programs. We have developed the Doctor of Pharmacy National Curriculum for the Ministry of Higher Education in Saudi Arabia, for example, and have imagined training for practicing nurses in the southern province of China in the much needed gerontology certificates. We talked about aging populations earlier. That is a need that is not only in India, but elsewhere. We manage the public certification, the public health certification for a major pharmaceutical company based in Hyderabad. And that contract has now developed into training middle management internationally for that company. These are just some examples of how MCPHS can be very specific, very surgical in the needs that the industry might see. Now, we are seeing a shift in the motivations of our students, thanks to these opportunities. Whereas before, the stereotype was of the Indian student wanting to come to the United States to migrate permanently. We are thrilled to see that now students are here to train, to learn, to network, and to come back to India. And they're motivated to make a difference in serving all socioeconomic levels in India with a commitment to the public health of the country. So we hope to continue to be a part of this exciting time in India's path to becoming a leading global healthcare provider. And I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you to Massachusetts and to MCPHS in particular, either virtually or in person as soon as these personal encounters are approved again, so that we can present you with some of these cutting-edge skill-specific programs and pedagogies. Thank you, and again, welcome to the Northeast.
Thank you. Thank you for your very kind invitation. You'll soon see us at your door.
Wonderful. So I'm going to follow up to ask for a date.
Also I agree with you that there are many people who come here, who pick up knowledge, who pick up skills, and then move back to India. And a very fine example of this particular cross flow of knowledge and going back to India is Dr. Reddy, Pratap Reddy, who's the chairman of Apollo Hospital. He was a doctor here in the United States and then went back to India and is one of his company, his Apollo chain of hospitals, one of the leading healthcare providers in the country. Also, people come to the United States. We are living in a globalized world. Today, Indian minds, Indian skills, professional skills happen to be and feed into global resource pool of talent and skills. So it's not just, Indian students coming to the United States only for looking at what United States has to offer, but, Indians today are employed and their skills and professionalism is accepted in every part of the world. They're performing here, they're performing in Europe, in Australia, in Japan, in the Middle East, in India, and elsewhere in the world. So that is how we are looking at it. We have a young population, we have young minds, bright minds. They can meet the requirements of India, and at the same time, they can fill the skill gaps that are there in various geographies of the world.
And I think as we've proven through this last 6 months that the remote contributions of people from across the globe can be very, very effective, and India's very well placed to take care of that. So, Ita, thank you very much for your remarks, and I'm sure the Consul General will follow up and, as he says, make a date with you to engage with what I know has been a very strong commitment to the Indian market by MCPHS. We've addressed most of the questions that are posed by the audience, and I feel that with all of these NEP webinars that we're delivering at SANMS Forum, we're doing a lot of them at the moment. They could always go on for hours and hours because there is so much scope for discussion. And Consul General, you've really provided a good insight, first and foremost, into the commitment at all levels of government, whether that be in Delhi, or whether that be in the missions overseas, to make sure that NEP is a success. And we certainly will continue the work that we've been doing over the last few years with the forum, with our university partners in your region who are very committed to seeing India be a key part of their long-term strategy. And so thank you very much for your remarks. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Matthew Cantwell and Lalit Singh. Matthew is the Chief Strategic Officer of McGraw-Hill, and Lalit is the Managing Director in India for McGraw-Hill. So, gentlemen, over to you for closing remarks before Susan wraps this up.
Thank you. Honorary Consul General, welcome to New York and congratulations on your role. When our office reopens, McGraw-Hill is just a few blocks from the consulate. We look forward to hosting you or coming to yours for tea. Thank you, SANMS 4 and US ISPF for hosting today and for the many attendees. Again, my name is Matthew Cantwell. I lead strategy for our international division of McGraw-Hill. from which we deliver education product and services into 125 countries. India is a key market for us, one of our largest markets, one of long history dating back to when we were Tata McGraw-Hill. In about 30 seconds, I'll turn over to my colleague, Dr. Lalit Singh. But first, I just want to say quickly that there are 34 million higher education students in India, roughly twice the enrollment of USA higher ed. Amongst the enrollees are some of the sharpest, hardest working students I have come across, and quite entrepreneurial. So I think when you combine the education forces in play at this moment, new education policy, India's already long-standing focus on education as a national priority, high and higher enrollments, internationalization of the university system, standardization of entrance tests, workforce and skills development, regional language inclusion, many other good policy points, and of course that entrepreneurial spirit. I'm genuinely excited to see what will surely result in a spike in intellectual property and human capital potential in India, coming out of India to the world, and from the world into India. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lalit Singh.
Yeah.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So it's pretty late in India right now, and my kids are making a bit of a noise just before going to bed. So I didn't want to disturb anybody, so put myself on mute. I was saying thank you, Matt, and thank you so much for Adrian and Susan. You know, you have us here. Really appreciate. And that's where I was saying namaste to Mr. Sandeep Jaiswal, sir. Really pleased to meet you. I'll just take a couple of minutes to introduce McGraw-Hill, although this is one brand that doesn't need any introduction in India. And as Matt was saying, you know, we have been known as Tata McGraw-Hill for a long time in India. That's how we started. It's a brand everybody, every student, every faculty member, every institution recognizes. My dad recognized it, I recognize it, my kids recognize it. So at least 3 generations I can vouch for. And this year we are celebrating our 50th year in India. So just I'll say a coincidence, or more than that, that we have the new education policy released in the 50th year that we are in India. And we are now right now really looking at the policy, and as we heard earlier, the execution is actually going to happen over the next 2, 3, 4 years, and we'll go through several steps in the process. So we'll be closely tracking on that and adapting to the new reality, to the new policy that is there. Some really unprecedented things there, and like focus on vocational a bit of it, giving flexibility to the students, and so all these things actually mean a new kind of course curricula and new kind of pedagogical structure. And we being at the center of all this as a content company, as a content provider, are really going to be at the center in the next few years as the policy gets executed. So we would love to work very closely with your office, sir, and also with all the other partners that Adrian has and Suzanne have here on this forum. And one thing I would like to say, there was a lot of discussion around collaboration. Adrian, you raised that point, and you explained it beautifully, Mr. Jaiswal. What I see a role for McGraw-Hill in this is actually that of a kind of a connecting link. So we are, as Matt said, more than 125-year-old company, very big presence across all kind of campuses in the US, and the same applies to India, right? So all the leading higher education institutions, research institutions, medical institutions, even large schools, right? So we are present there. So as we talk about collaboration, as we talk about real working together, I believe companies like us, who are kind of placed in between, can play a big role, and we'll be very keen to really play that role and facilitate more interactions between different kind of players in the ecosystem. As you said, this ecosystem needs to be developed, and we are part of that ecosystem. And we believe that we can help contribute, develop that ecosystem further. So we are very happy to be a part of this forum. We are happy to be introduced to Sanam S4 and all the other partner organizations there. And we'll be in touch with your office and Mr. Jaiswal and your counterparts in India just to see, how we can play our small role in making this policy, a real thing in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. So we welcome any kind of role that we can play. You believe we will welcome those opportunities, and we also welcome the opportunities coming in and the feedbacks coming in from other organizations to make this thing work for everyone. So that's all I would like to say here. Once again, very pleased to be on this forum. Thanks for having us here.
Thank you, Lalit. Thank you, Matt and Consul Generals. Consul General, final remarks from you, and then I'll hand over to Susan to wrap up because we are on the top of the hour.
No, thank you very much. It has been a productive 1 hour of exchange. I have learned a lot. I would like to say that we would request you to send in your inputs, your feedback on the national education policy, so that we can have a look at it and also convey it to India for people who are into the policy segment. And we are here to help you, and we are here to do our best for you. Thank you very much for this session.
Thank you very much. Susan at the forum.
Thank you all for your participation. I think, Mr. Consul General, you can see there's a lot of excitement in the U.S. about the new education policy, both from our higher educational institutions, but also from our corporate members who are very large employers and look forward to expanding their workforce. So with that, let me thank everyone and wish you all a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye all.